On Friday, March 14th, it was cloudy. In the evening, I received a message from my fiancé's rumored ex-girlfriend. She sent many screenshots of their chats and asked me if I could let them be together. I looked at the screenshots she sent. In the conversation, he called her Dear Sophia. He said, "You left yourself a way out, and Emma is also my way out." He said, "My parents like her very much and I can't find any fault in her, but you know I love you." He said, "As long as you put aside all your concerns and agree to marry me now, I'll break up with her immediately." Yes, I'm Emma, and I'm the her, in his words, who he can break up with at any time. If your blind date has no car, no independent housing, and is in debt for 300,000 yuan, and more importantly, the other person has an ex-girlfriend who is said to be extremely beautiful, would you choose to date such a person? Or even want to marry him? My name is Emma and I'm 23 years old. I'm a primary school teacher. In our small county with a medium level of development, it's very difficult for this profession to meet unmarried young men, so it was quite natural for me to go on blind dates. When I met Julian, it was the second year of my work. I was exhausted by the endless cycle of blind date, disappointment, and had no hope of finding a suitable partner through blind dates. It happened that the school's modernization acceptance inspection was at a critical moment and I was detained at school to work overtime during the National Day holiday. The matchmaker also conveyed the other person's wish to meet during the holiday. With the thought of better to die early and be reborn early, better to end early and be at peace early, I set the blind date time on October 2nd and the location at school in a hasty way. To what extent was this meeting hasty? I didn't wear makeup, didn't do my hair, and didn't wear a skirt. I just simply wore a sweater and jeans. I felt fresh and clean myself, but I also knew in my heart that the other person might think I looked plain. And some people might even think that showing up without makeup on the first meeting was disrespectful to the other person. It didn't matter. Anyway, I didn't have any expectations. But no matter how much I didn't value this blind date, I never expected that the first sight my blind date saw of me was that I was lying on the ground wholeheartedly making environmental decoration paintings. At that time, I was humming a song, shaking my head and splashing ink, and my long hair was tied up on my head with a ballpoint pen because I thought it was in the way. Until I heard a clear and gentle male voice with a hint of laughter, "Hello, are you Teacher Emma?" "I'm Julian." I froze for 2 seconds and didn't look up. Instead, I calmly rummaged through a pile of drawing papers and brushes. "Teacher Emma?" This time there was some apology in the voice. "Sorry, I arrived a little earlier than the appointed time." I thought to myself, you didn't arrive just a little earlier. You arrived half an hour earlier. I didn't say anything and continued to rummage. "Teacher Emma? What are you looking for? Do you need my help?" "I want to find a crack in the ground, preferably a big one that can hide people." Probably seeing my embarrassment, he laughed again and his voice was full of joy. He asked me, "Did you find it?" I took a deep breath. Since things had come to this, I might as well go ahead. "Didn't find it. I won't look for it anymore." I quickly straightened up with an agility I had never had before and looked at the other person. At this glance, I saw his clear and handsome eyebrows and eyes, his long and thick eyelashes, his straight nose bridge, and the corners of his lips that curled up in a smile. I was surprised and confused. How could someone who looked like this still need to go on a blind date? Later I realized that the unexpected colorful candies might contain unexpectedly bitter centers. But at that time, I just felt full of regret. Why did we meet in such a situation? Why didn't I put on makeup, curl my hair, and wear a beautiful dress in advance? This meeting was embarrassing and hasty. After chatting for a few words, he left on the grounds of not disturbing my work. When I sent him out of the school gate, the gentle breeze blew and I saw the broken hair on his forehead fluttering gently. I suddenly realized something and raised my hand to take off the ballpoint pen on my head. My messy hair poured down and I sighed in dismay. Looking at him smiling and making a gesture of contacting by phone, I knew in my heart that it was probably just polite and kind. Since it ended like this, I didn't have anything to regret. Who would have thought? In the afternoon of that day, he not only contacted me but also invited me to dinner. Given the other person's once-in-a-decade appearance in the blind date circle, I cheered up and dressed myself up elaborately, pretending that the embarrassing meeting in the morning didn't exist, and shamelessly went to the appointment. During the dinner, he thoughtfully didn't mention the meeting in the morning and didn't make any comments or jokes about my change. He sterilized the tableware and poured a cup of tea with just the right temperature and put it beside me, as if the embarrassing meeting in the morning really didn't exist. He reintroduced himself and this time focused on talking about his career and family. He said that he is currently a project supervisor and his workplace is not fixed but not too far from home. At present, he is working in another district about 3 hours drive from home. By the way, his family belongs to the school district of our school. Simply put, it takes only 5 or 6 minutes to walk from his home to my workplace. He said that both of his parents have retired and his mother's health is not very good, so he won't go too far from home and has to come back home every week. He also has an older sister who is married and her child studies in our school. Coincidentally, it's the grade I teach. So I took the initiative to ask the child's name and promised to ask my colleagues to take care of him. When I said this, he looked at me with some meaningful eyes. I quickly explained, "Don't misunderstand. I don't mean anything else. We have met each other and even if the deal doesn't work out, we should still be kind to each other." He laughed and while scooping up the soup and putting it beside me, he lengthened his voice and asked me, "Doesn't the deal work out?" I looked at his clear and handsome eyebrows and eyes with a smile and seemed to see the bright moonlight and the vast galaxy in them. In my gradually unsteady heartbeat, I barely distinguished a cry from the bottom of my heart, "Yes. Why not? I'd even give my life for it." That night we had a very congenial chat. When the waiter started rolling his eyes at us after 2 or 3 hours of dinner, I reluctantly said goodbye to him. He insisted on seeing me to the entrance of the community and then walked home by himself. I secretly watched his tall and straight figure walking away calmly and quietly pressed my wildly beating heart. How could I describe the feeling at that moment? For the first time in more than 20 years, I truly felt my heart flutter. For the first time, I believed that the love in novels really existed. For the first time, I thought that I had really met the one destined for me. Every word he said and every action he took perfectly matched my fantasies and expectations of my other half. But I never admitted that I fell in love with him at first sight because when we first met, apart from being embarrassed, I didn't have any other emotions. Now that I think about it, during the process of our getting along, he was always at ease while I was in a complete mess. I dialed my roommate's phone number and shared this meeting with excitement. Actually, it was only a few steps away to get back to our shared rental house. I could have waited to tell her when we met, sitting on the sofa, eating snacks, and casually sharing this blind date experience, just like every other time before. But I couldn't wait. The joy of finally waiting for you made me eager to announce it to the whole world. In my nervous anticipation, I received his text message asking to meet the next day. This meeting was arranged beside the artificial lake downstairs in his residential community. After chatting for a while, he asked me if it was convenient for me to go to his home and sit for a while, saying that his parents were very eager to meet me. According to my usual way of dealing with people, it was impossible for me to presumptuously go to the other person's home on the second day of knowing someone and meet the elders empty-handed. But his excessive enthusiasm and my infatuation with him finally dispelled my reluctance and hesitation. I was even a bit secretly happy. Was his eagerness to take me to meet his parents a sign that he was also very satisfied with me? His parents were as warm and considerate as he had described. They showed their recognition and affection for me at our first meeting. I will always remember the scene of that meeting. His mother held my hand and said how he described me when he came back yesterday and how he thought I was a rare good girl, which made them so curious that they insisted that he bring me home to meet them. I gave Julian a strict order before he went out today. I said if you don't have the ability to bring teacher Emma back today, you might as well not come back at all. His mother joked with a smile while asking him to wash the fruits. His father was sitting in the leisure chair on the balcony reading the newspaper, smiling and listening to our conversation, occasionally interjecting a few words. He was elegant in speech and had great poise. Julian washed the fruits and brought them out. He picked out a big and red peach and handed it to me. His mother smiled and teased, "Oh, you used to dislike peaches because of the fuzz and never wanted to wash them. It seems that teacher Emma has great influence." He smiled, looked at me, and didn't say anything. I felt both shy and embarrassed, holding the peach in my hand. For a moment, I felt that its sweet fragrance filled my heart. This meeting officially confirmed our relationship with the premise of getting married. However, because his workplace was far away and it was inconvenient to travel back and forth, we could only meet during holidays. So I especially cherished every weekend when he came back. On Friday of the second week after our relationship was made clear in front of his parents, he invited me to his home for dinner on behalf of his family. This time, I had prepared gifts. After he returned from his workplace and picked me up at school, we went back to his home together. After dinner, I offered to help wash the dishes. His mother smiled and pushed me to sit on the sofa, stuffed the cut fruits into my hands, and said, "In our family tradition, washing dishes is a man's job." Sure enough, we saw his father pick up the used dishes and chopsticks skillfully and walk into the kitchen. He was about to go and help too, but was pushed to sit beside me. His mother half-jokingly complained, "Someone managed to rush back early on Friday. We all know who it's for. You two have a good chat. I'll go and supervise." Before she finished speaking, she had already gone into the kitchen. After chatting for a while, I noticed that he looked a bit tired. Remembering that he had taken several transfers on the subway and bus to get home and then rushed to pick me up without a break, I proposed to leave. Unexpectedly, when his mother heard that I was going to leave, she enthusiastically invited me to stay overnight. Only then did I know that on the day after my first visit to his home, his mother had already prepared a whole set of toiletries for me at home and even bought me new pajamas. Actually, the rental house I lived in was only a 10-minute walk from his home. I was embarrassed to stay, but he had taken a more than 3-hour ride to get back. If I was going to leave, his mother insisted that he send me back. It would take another half an hour or so for a round trip. I felt sorry for his tiring journey and couldn't bear to go against the elder's considerate intentions. Besides, thinking that I was definitely going to marry him anyway, I put aside my discomfort and agreed to stay. His home was a small 2-bedroom apartment of over 80 square meters. If I stayed, he would have to sleep in the living room. When he was carrying the quilt out of the bedroom, I felt embarrassed for taking his place. He teased me, "If you don't mind, how about we share the nest together?" Then he pretended to turn around and walk back. I pushed him out of the bedroom, blocked the door and replied, "We're not the same kind of birds. How can we share the same nest? You go and make do on the branch outside for a night." Then I closed the door neatly and locked it. Listening to his cheerful laughter outside the door, I thought that I would never be able to find another person who could make my heart flutter like this in my life. The first time I heard the name Sophia was from his mother's mouth. Actually, I had known for a long time that he had an ex-girlfriend who he had been in a relationship with for quite a while. The colleague who introduced him to me lived upstairs in his building and had mentioned it to me before. But I had never regarded the fact that my blind date had an ex-girlfriend as important information. In my opinion, the word ex was enough. Why should I cling to a past relationship? It would only make the other person unhappy and make myself uncomfortable. Moreover, the matchmaker repeatedly assured me that the two of them had completely broken up. At that time, my relationship with him was already quite stable. And my workplace was so close to his home that even when he wasn't at home, his mother often warmly invited me to visit. I was too embarrassed to always decline, so I would go once for every 3 invitations. As I went there more often, I felt more at ease in his home. Besides, I had always been popular with elders since I was a child and could always find topics to chat with his parents. I would talk about writing with his father and chat about daily life with his mother. Once, I bought some big mangoes with my colleagues. Remembering that his mother liked them, I went to their home on purpose to give them to her. Coincidentally, his father wasn't at home and his mother wasn't feeling well. So I took the initiative to stay and take care of her. When I had just finished cooking, his father came back. He was quite surprised when he saw a table full of dishes and said, "There are very few young girls nowadays who have such good cooking skills." I said a few modest words, but still felt a bit secretly happy inside. Since that time, his parents' attitude towards me had obviously become much closer. Sometimes, I really felt that they treated me like their own daughter. Whenever I ate a bit more of something at their home, they would definitely prepare a lot of it every time I visited. His mother would tell me everything, and as we chatted, we inevitably talked about his ex-girlfriend. The name Sophia was also what I heard from his mother. The old lady was full of complaints when she mentioned this person, that Sophia was Julian's girlfriend when he was in college. I didn't like her the first time she came to our home. She was pretty, just like the big star Youngmi. But she had such a condescending look and hardly said a word to me and your uncle. She came several times. Once, when I wasn't feeling well and was resting in the bedroom, from the moment she entered the door until she left, she didn't even say a word of greeting. I really couldn't get along with such a daughter-in-law. Just think about it. What good would such a daughter-in-law bring except looking good when taken out? All she did was cause trouble. During that period of time, every time I thought of her, I couldn't eat or sleep well. Both his father and I were against them continuing their relationship. Fortunately, she also looked down on our family. Julian communicated with her for a long time but there was no improvement. Finally, the two of them broke up. Our Julian, don't think he talks much. He really has you, Emma, in his heart. I didn't see him care so much about Sophia. Every time before you come, he would ask me whether I've cooked the dishes you like, whether I've prepared the peaches you love, and whether I've bought the snacks you like. Oh my, he cares so much. Every time I heard his parents describe how much he cared about me behind my back, I felt extremely sweet. I thought that there was also a hero like in novels in my world, a man who cared about you but never said much and instead silently arranged everything thoughtfully for you. How could one not fall deeper and deeper in love with such a man? So what if he had a beautiful ex-girlfriend? In terms of appearance, I'm not bad either. What's more, an ex-girlfriend who was defeated by reality, what was there to care about? Under what circumstances did I clearly know what the reality was that defeated Julian's ex-girlfriend? It was before Julian officially shared a room with me. That day, we were lying side by side on the bed in his room. He held my hand with one hand and told me about his entrepreneurial experience in college. He said, "Emma, I don't want to take advantage of you when you know nothing, so I'll tell you everything you should know. After listening, if you think you can't accept it, I'll send you back." I nodded and got ready to listen. I studied architecture in college. At that time, my family's financial situation was quite good. With my parents' support, I contracted some small projects with several classmates. At first, we made money and quite a lot of it. At that time, we were young and inexperienced and didn't know what it meant to quit while we were ahead. After making money, we became bolder and invested more. As a result, the projects we took on were unfinished and the developers ran away with the money. We not only lost the money for materials but also owed a lot of workers' wages. My idea at that time was very simple. No matter what, we had to pay the workers. They had worked hard for almost a year and were counting on the wages to make a living. My parents took out all their savings but it still wasn't enough. We almost had to sell the house we're living in now. I stopped them and took out a loan myself. Over the years, I've paid off quite a lot, but there's still a lot left. Well, how much is left unpaid? More than 300,000 yuan. He looked at me carefully. Without waiting for my response, he continued, "So, I won't be able to buy a car or a house in a short time. If we get married, we'll have to live in this house for now, together with my parents." I didn't say anything for a long while. He seemed to have expected it. When he silently got up from the bed and was about to put on his shoes, I grabbed the corner of his clothes. I just calculated. With my salary plus yours, minus the necessary expenses, if we save money carefully, we can surely save 100,000 yuan in a year. I'll see if I can find a part-time job in a few days to earn some small money for daily expenses. You don't know this, right? I also have some little talents. I deliberately showed a somewhat proud expression to tease him. Without waiting for his reaction, I went on, it's okay not to buy a house for the time being. There's no pressure to repay the mortgage. Besides, it's so close to my workplace. How convenient it is for me to go to work. Moreover, I get along so well with uncle and aunt. It's also convenient for me to take care of them if we live together. Before I finished speaking, he suddenly turned around and hugged me tightly. That was the first time he hugged me like that. I knew that my reaction was beyond his expectation. There was a lot of emotion in that hug. He hugged me and murmured, Emma, how can you be so nice? So nice that I feel I don't deserve you. I hugged him back and replied with a smile, I'm not so nice to everyone. It's because it's you. What's so important about external material conditions? I have a stable job and won't starve anyway. We'll have a house and a car sooner or later. Even if we don't, it doesn't matter. How rare a man like this is. He probably never expected that his confession not only didn't scare me away but instead made me have more admiration and fascination for his courage and sense of responsibility. I thought that a man like this was so charming. Young but experienced, mature and steady in dealing with people and things. He was exactly the other half I had dreamed of. Looking back now, it's true that reading too many romance novels can make one lose one's head. Before he even did much, I had already created a perfect male protagonist persona for him in my mind and then got myself completely infatuated with it. The process of our relationship was uneventful. We usually chatted via text messages, occasionally talked on the phone, and mostly met on weekends. After our relationship progressed to the stage of talking about marriage, I started to feel that something was wrong. If I had to say exactly when it started, it was probably when his mother was hospitalized. I received a call from his sister at work, telling me that his mother had been hospitalized due to heart discomfort. For the first time since I started working, I asked for leave from my leader and hurriedly bought fruits and nutritional supplements to visit her in the hospital. When I arrived, his father and sister were both there. Probably not expecting me to come so early, his sister was very surprised to see me and asked me with concern, did it affect your work? We didn't originally plan to tell you, but we were afraid that you would be worried if you went to our home and didn't find anyone. I shook my head to indicate that it was okay and looked at the old lady lying on the hospital bed and asked with concern, how's Auntie? Your sister just couldn't hold her tongue. It's not a big deal. When people get old, their body parts age. I've had this old problem for a long time and it flares up from time to time. But seeing Emma makes me feel like I'm already okay. Thinking that the old lady would feel uncomfortable lying down for a long time, I took the initiative to massage her back. After a few massages, sure enough, the old lady's expression relaxed a lot. Seeing this, his sister beside her also seemed to breathe a sigh of relief and was in the mood to joke. Oh my, no wonder Mom and Dad love Emma so much. This second daughter is really more considerate than me, the eldest daughter, and 100 times better than your silly son. When it came to Julian, his mother told me, don't tell Julian about my hospitalization, so that he won't worry. Anyway, he'll be back on the weekend. We'll tell him then. I nodded and agreed. Coincidentally, just at that moment, Julian called. I don't know if it was some kind of telepathy between mother and son or what, but his first question was, how's everything at home? Is everything okay? I'm not good at lying, so I simply replied, yes. Probably thinking that my answer was too brief, he asked again, where are you? Is it inconvenient to talk? Under the teasing gazes of his mother and sister, I hurriedly left the ward and replied, no, I'm watching TV at home. But I knew that he must have heard the noisy background sound on the phone and didn't believe my excuse of watching TV at all. But at that time, I thought that everything would be clear when he came back on the weekend, so I didn't explain too much. It was from that day that I slightly felt that his attitude towards me had changed a bit. I couldn't tell exactly where the change was. It seemed that I sensed some coldness and carelessness, but it wasn't that obvious. Even later, when he knew that his mother had been hospitalized and that I was at the hospital at that time, the situation didn't improve. His work seemed to get busier, and there were more and more cases where he couldn't come back on weekends due to overtime. I was a bit uneasy, but all the procedures that should be followed before marriage were proceeding in an orderly manner. I comforted myself that everything would be okay once we got married and everything was settled. He attached so much importance to his family. Once we got married and I became his family, he would surely treat me better. According to our local custom, if a couple is preparing to get married, the bride should go to the groom's family to celebrate the spring festival. On New Year's Eve, I made dumplings with his parents. His mother said that he didn't like dumplings, but since I made them, he ate a full bowl. Not long after dinner, he said that some classmates from out of town had come here and he needed to go and greet them. Although I was a bit uncomfortable that he left me alone on New Year's Eve, I still pretended to be magnanimous and didn't stop him. When he came back that day, he smelled of alcohol and wasn't in a good mood. He didn't say a few words to me before saying that he was tired and went to bed. Later, I found out that the person who came to see him that day was Sophia. Strictly speaking, she was indeed his classmate. I guessed that Sophia came that day with a somewhat provocative intention. Unfortunately, I was completely unaware of it and failed to live up to her full enthusiasm for showing off. On the second day of the Lunar New Year, he went to my home. My father entertained this prospective son-in-law hospitably. After dinner, they sat on the wicker chairs on the balcony chatting. My father deliberately mentioned my birthday. My solar calendar birthday happens to be on March 8th, Women's Day. My father said that on the day I was born, all the women in labor in the whole hospital gave birth to girls. At that time, the nurse even joked, "These little girls came just in time for the festival." I sat beside them, smiling and listening to my father's old story, not having the heart to interrupt him as he was thinking about his daughter. Julian didn't have much of a reaction, and I naturally thought that he had taken it to heart. But that day, I noticed that he had changed his phone wallpaper. It was a selfie of himself in front of a certain building in Yonghe Palace in Beijing. The man in the photo was smiling slightly, with a glint in his eyes. That glint made him seem a bit childish, which was something that never appeared when he was with me. I intuitively thought that the photo should be taken from a girl's perspective and the person who took this photo must have some unusual feelings for him. "Your photo?" He raised his eyes to look at me and put away his phone. "The photo is nice. Who took it for you? When did you go to Yonghe Palace?" His gaze dodged a bit. "I went on a business trip to Beijing with colleagues last week and dropped by for a visit. A colleague took the photo for me." Colleague? Male or female? Of course it was a male. I didn't say anything more, but for some reason, since then, that photo had been constantly popping up in my mind and gradually became an indescribable thorn stuck in my heart. More than half a month later, on Saturday, it was my birthday. People here are used to celebrating their lunar birthdays, which is a few days earlier than the solar calendar birthday. Actually, he had already said that he couldn't come back on the weekend because he had something to do. But I was still full of anticipation, thinking that maybe he had said that on purpose and maybe he would suddenly come back and give me a surprise. But that day, I waited from morning till night, yet he didn't show up, and I didn't even receive a "happy birthday" from him. My father called and asked me, "Are you coming home to celebrate your birthday? Has Julian come back?" Not wanting to worry my parents, and for some reason in my heart, I didn't want to admit that he would really forget my birthday, nor did I want my parents to have a bad impression of him. So I pretended to be relaxed and said, "I won't go back. Julian has reserved a restaurant and we'll go for dinner later." Listening to my father's half-serious and half-joking complaint on the other end of the phone, "A daughter is hard to keep at home once she grows up," I just felt so aggrieved that I wanted to cry. This was the first birthday I had after having a boyfriend. I didn't expect gifts or flowers. I just hoped that he could remember it and come back to accompany me, which would be a surprise for me. But unexpectedly, even this had become a luxury. They say that even a clay figurine has some temper, but I actually didn't know how to lose my temper with him. Does loving someone really mean being so humble? I even silently comforted myself that nowadays, who would still care about the lunar birthday? Maybe he remembered my solar calendar birthday. After all, it coincided with a festival and was easy to remember. But the sense of loss in my heart couldn't be concealed. For the first time, I began to doubt this relationship. No matter what his personality was like, how could a man who didn't even remember his girlfriend's birthday, especially when my father had just reminded him not long ago, care about me much? After all, I couldn't let it go. In the following few days, I was a bit cold towards him. I was looking forward to him asking me, "What's wrong with you?" But it seemed that he couldn't sense the change in my attitude, or maybe he did sense it but didn't care. On March 8th, which was a Friday, I asked him if he was coming back that day. He said no and that he would come back on Saturday. I couldn't hold back my grievance anymore and said, "Today is March 8th. He was stunned for a moment and then said, "Oh, Happy Women's Day, Teacher Emma. My lunar birthday has already passed. Today is my solar calendar birthday." Poor my father had told that long story about my birthday, but it turned out that he really hadn't listened. He was silent for a longer time this time. After a while, he said, "I'll go back now. You wait for me at home. I'll buy a cake and go back." After hanging up the phone, I hesitated whether to follow his arrangement. On the one hand, I was angry about his negligence towards me, and on the other hand, I didn't want to make things awkward. I was in a dilemma when my phone rang. It was a call from his mother. I pressed the answer button, and on the other end of the phone, a kind voice came, "Emma, why didn't you tell Auntie that it's your birthday today? Come to our home quickly. Your uncle has cooked the dishes you like. Your sister has also reserved a KTV room. After dinner, we'll go singing. Later, Auntie will scold that naughty boy for you." How could he forget that it's Emma's birthday when he doesn't even celebrate his own birthday? It turned out that he didn't celebrate his birthday. So did he never think it was an important thing from the bottom of his heart? I was a bit annoyed. Was it wrong for me to lose my temper with him? Anyway, this call gave me an excuse. More than 2 hours later, he came back. "Why did you come back so quickly?" "I took a taxi back." Looking at his dusty appearance, I felt a bit guilty again and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lost my temper with you." He shook his head, and there were many complicated emotions in his gaze when he looked at me. We took the cake he bought and went to the KTV. Only then did I know that he sang really well, especially when he sang "Lonely Northern Hemisphere." His singing was almost as good as the original. When I was moved by the deep feelings in his singing, I never thought that those feelings were not for me. If I hadn't seen their chat records later, I might never have known that on this night, while he was lying beside me, he was saying to another woman, "If you put aside your concerns and be with me now, I'll break up with her immediately." When his parents proposed to finalize our marriage, he didn't object. His parents went with us to choose the wedding rings. His mother carefully selected one for me while he watched beside. It was decided that on March 15th, the parents of both sides would meet for dinner to discuss the wedding date, the betrothal gifts, and the details of the wedding. It was sort of a simple engagement ceremony. His mother even gave me the key to their home early. At that time, I really felt that everything was settled. I was ready to take care of the elderly after marriage, ready to pay off debts with him, and ready for a short-term separation between us. In the only future he planned for us, he said that he wanted to buy a house in his workplace in the future. I could take our children to find him during my winter and summer vacations. I thought that buying a house was something in the distant future, so I didn't object. On March 14th, Friday. I still remember that the weather wasn't good that day. It was gloomy all day long, but I was in a good mood because we were going to get engaged the next day. After work, I packed up my things and was about to go and reserve a restaurant for our engagement dinner the next day. According to the etiquette, the restaurant should have been reserved by the man's side, but he said that he had something to do and couldn't come back that day. I also thought that his parents were old and it was inconvenient for them to bother about it, so I took on the task myself. Just when I was about to turn off my computer, I found that the QQ logged in on my computer had been blinking. After opening it, several consecutive friend requests popped up. I thought it was parents who had something urgent to find me. I didn't realize at that time why they didn't call, so I clicked to approve. The dialog box popped up, and the other person's first sentence was, "Is it Teacher Emma?" "Yes, it's me." "Who are you?" "Teacher Emma, you're really good at winning people's hearts. I heard that you've coaxed his parents around and they almost treat you as their own daughter, right?" "Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. You should have heard of me. I'm Sophia." I wasn't overly surprised. I had also heard from Julian's mother that Sophia had pestered Julian after they broke up, but Julian was firm in his attitude and she never succeeded. "What do you want?" I asked calmly. "What's the point of you doing this? What's the use of you winning over his parents? His heart and himself still belong to me. We're getting engaged tomorrow." She didn't say anything and was silent for a while. I thought that she contacted me today and said these sarcastic words just out of an ex-girlfriend's unwillingness. Just when I was about to end this boring conversation, turn off the computer and leave, she sent a lot of pictures. They were chat screenshots of two people. I looked at the screenshots she sent. In the conversation, he said, "You've left yourself a way out, and Emma is also my way out." He said, "My parents like her very much and I can't find any fault in her, but you know I love you." He said, "As long as you put aside all your concerns and agree to marry me now, I'll break up with her immediately." He had always addressed me politely and restrainedly as Teacher Emma, and occasionally called me by my full name, Emma. But he called her in a very intimate way. I carefully checked the time on the screenshots. Most of them were on weekends. Even many of them were in the dead of night when he was by my side. Can you imagine that? He was lying beside me, yet entangling with another woman. That included the day when he came back to celebrate my birthday. In the dialog box, Sophia's messages were still coming in one after another. "Teacher Emma, you won't be happy even if you marry him. He loves me. Why are you clinging to a man whose heart isn't with you? Just step aside and let us be together, okay? For such a big thing, you just want me to step aside with one word, let you be? What do you want? As for the issue of who the man belongs to, at least we should talk face to face. You, me, and Julian, the three of us should meet face to face." Sophia on the other side was still typing, but I didn't have the heart to argue with her anymore. I turned off the computer and just felt a chill on my heart, but I still held a bit of cheap doubt. The Sophia I had heard of had always been a very scheming woman. What if she faked the chat records to deceive me? After all, it wasn't technically difficult. I restrained my trembling hands and dialed Julian's number. "Hello? Come back, now, immediately." "What's wrong? Didn't we agree that I would go directly to the engagement site tomorrow when I come back?" Hearing his seemingly clueless reply, I was actually relieved for a moment, but I still insisted that he come back. His next sentence pushed me into an abyss. "Did she contact you?" My heart sank because of his words and shattered hard on the ground. He knew. He actually knew all along. Then what was I? What was the point of my entanglement, hesitation, and self-comfort during this period? What was the point of my tolerating his coldness and wholeheartedly looking forward to marrying him? What was the point of the future I had planned one-sidedly? I had even thought about taking care of his elderly parents for him and figured out how to live frugally to help him pay off his debts first. So you really knew? Then there's nothing more to say. Come back and take the ring and the key to your home. You can explain it to your parents yourself. I hung up the phone. Maybe it was because my heart had already fallen to the bottom and had nowhere else to fall, or perhaps the bits and pieces of the past had made me have a premonition long ago. At that moment, I somehow had a calmness that everything was settled. There was no need to reserve the restaurant. I first dialed my parents' number and told them not to come tomorrow. My father asked what had happened. I replied with a smile, "It's nothing. Anyway, you and Mom didn't really like this son-in-law that much. I've changed my mind now. I'll talk about it when I go home tomorrow." After ending the call, I went to get a haircut. I had once promised him that I would grow my hair longer. He said he liked girls with hair down to their waists. Since then, I hadn't cut my hair at all. But now, I just felt so ridiculous about myself. Isn't there a saying that, use a sharp sword to cut off the threads of love? So I simply cut my hair short. If I was going to break it off, I might as well make it clean and clear. I went back to my rental house and sat on the sofa in the living room. The ring and the key were lying quietly on the coffee table, as if silently mocking me. At that moment, many things that I hadn't thought about before, those faint coldness and those unnoticed clues suddenly came together in a line, mocking my ignorance, my self-deception, and my numbness and stupidity. I didn't know how much time had passed before he came to my place to find me. When he opened the door and faced me, there was no panic or guilt or uneasiness as I had imagined. He was actually still smiling. Was it because he didn't care about losing me that he could smile like that? Or was it because he could finally be free from this relationship and thus felt happy? There's nothing more to say between us. Take your things and leave. Emma, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm just curious. Were you two never broken up, or did you get back together later? Don't put it so harshly. Is this harsh? Right. I've always been obedient to you and never said no to you. So you even think the word, get back together, is harsh? I didn't originally want to say much more to him, but I was filled with anger and grievance in my heart. If I didn't say it now, when would I have another chance? Emma, I know I'm sorry to you. I didn't mean to deceive you from the very beginning. When I met you, we had indeed broken up. But later, when she heard that I was getting married, she came back to find me. She even quit her original job and went to work in my company. So you were touched and softened? Or couldn't control your feelings? No wonder you came back less and less often. It turned out that you two were having a good time together. No wonder you said you wanted to buy a house there. What a good plan you had. You were thinking that you two could live together there, and I would take care of your parents and manage the household affairs here for you, right? No wonder he took me to meet his parents on the second day after we met. He wasn't looking for a partner for himself. He just wanted his parents to choose a daughter-in-law they liked. So the progress of our relationship was all decided by his parents. Even the diamond ring was chosen by his mother. So he had never verbally expressed his feelings for me. The care I thought he had for me actually, when I thought about it carefully, all came from what his mother said. He just didn't refute it, but he had never actually admitted it either. He had a two birds with one stone plan, but he didn't think that even if I was a fool who could be kept in the dark for a lifetime, the other person wouldn't be willing to be a mistress without a name or status. Suddenly, I lost the desire to continue questioning him. The more I asked, the more it would only prove how ridiculous I was. There was a hollow feeling in my heart, and I felt exhausted both physically and mentally. His indifference to me was reflected in every perfunctory chat, in his never being able to remember my birthday, in his increasingly busy work, and in the weekends when he came back less and less often. As for those extremely sweet love words, they were just casual and perfunctory charity from a seasoned player in the game of love. The only bit of conscience he had towards me was probably that even when he slept in the same bed with me, he would hug me and kiss me, but he had never tried to cross the final line. I used to sweetly think that it was respect for me. Turns out he just had someone else in his heart and didn't want to touch me? All right. I didn't lose both my body and my heart to someone. At least it's not a devastating loss. I don't even know whether my pain comes from the pain of losing him, the pain of being betrayed, or the pain of seeing the planned future collapse in an instant and feeling regretful. Forget it. Take your things and leave. At this time, his emotions finally changed a bit. For the first time, the person who had always been calm and unrestrained in front of me stammered, Emma, I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm not without feelings for you. She has been with me for 6 years, starting from college. She accompanied me through all the ups and downs. I just thought that either way I would hurt someone. We haven't known each other for long, so you wouldn't be hurt too deeply. Julian. I interrupted him sharply. If you had even the slightest bit of pity for me, you wouldn't have dragged it to this point and let another woman put me in such an embarrassing situation. Now that things have come to this, how dare you say you didn't mean to hurt me? Later, his parents finally came after hearing the news. It was the first time I saw his father lose his temper so much that he even hit him. I stepped forward to stop him and saw blood on Julian's forehead. Suddenly, I felt it was unnecessary. Looking at Julian's embarrassed appearance, I suddenly didn't understand what I loved about this man. After all, what I fell in love with was just my fantasy. I was trapped in the beautiful dream I wove by myself and couldn't extricate myself. Now that the dream was over, I could also step back. Uncle and Aunt are old and shouldn't get angry. Take them back home. Go back and have a good talk. I believe there are no parents in the world who can really go against their children's wishes. If you are firm in your attitude, they will agree to your affair with Sophia sooner or later. Julian seemed surprised that I would say that and looked at me in astonishment. I didn't pay any more attention to him and instead held his mother's arm. Auntie, don't be angry either. After all, it's his life. Let him live with the person he loves. Otherwise, would he bring in another fool like me and harm other girls? His mother patted my hand and didn't say anything more. She and his father took Julian and left. I watched their backs as if watching a farce finally come to an end. That night, I didn't shed a single tear. However, during this weekend, just in 2 days, I lost 6 pounds. The next day, I went home and explained the whole story to my parents. My mother was both angry and distressed and sat on the sofa crying. I still didn't cry. I just felt sorry for my parents, making them sad about my affairs at their age. So during the 2 days at home, I didn't show any abnormality. I ate and drank as usual. When my parents saw that I didn't seem to be affected too much, they just said that their daughter was strong and felt somewhat relieved. On Monday, I went to work as usual. It was just a broken relationship. Life still had to go on. I didn't think it was worth being decadent for even a minute for such a man. But after all, I was deeply hurt. Even though I seemed calm on the surface, the fact that my first love at the age of 23 ended so miserably really took a toll on me. I used to always fantasize about finding my own hero like in novels, but in the end, I lived myself into a cannon fodder female supporting role in a cheesy soap opera. About half a month later, his parents took him to my home again. His parents still held hope that we could make up. The elders of both sides were talking outside while he followed me into the bedroom. I didn't say anything as I didn't know what to say. The room fell silent for a moment, and it was easy to hear the conversation separated by just a door. My mother's voice was calm and restrained. After a series of apologies from his parents, she said, "To be honest, I wasn't really satisfied when Julian first came to our home. I don't mean that your son is bad, but I would rather my daughter find a boy who has her in his heart and eyes." But what we saw was that Emma was always revolving around Julian. On the day when he first visited our home before the spring festival, it was windy and the temperature was several degrees below zero. Our silly daughter ran to several stores one after another just to buy the yogurt that Julian liked to drink, facing the strong wind and the dusty sky. But I noticed that Julian didn't even know that Emma didn't like coriander. These words probably touched Julian, and he suddenly burst into tears. He took out the engagement ring that I had returned before. "Emma, let's get engaged. Let's start over, okay? I'll break up with Sophia completely. I'll transfer my job back. I'll always be by your side and won't go anywhere anymore, okay?" I looked at the gloom between his eyebrows and didn't want to guess how much of what he said was out of helplessness. I didn't know what he had gone through at home these days, but I guessed it wouldn't be pleasant. Actually, not long after he went back that day, his sister sent me a text message. "Emma, sister knows that the harm this incident has done to you is irreparable, but please believe that Mom and Dad really like you. Mom and Dad are very angry and Julian is still kneeling now." I asked him, "How could you bear to hurt a girl who has you in her heart and eyes and then go back to that bad one?" He said that he just thought Sophia had been with him for a long time and he couldn't let her down. "Emma," he was just confused for a moment. "Don't rush to make a decision, okay? Give him time and he'll come to his senses." "But why should I wait for someone who doesn't love me to come to his senses?" Julian, on the first day we started dating, I told you that I don't have much of a temper and I think I'm quite sensible. I can tolerate other things, but there are two things that are my bottom line. One is cheating, and the other is domestic violence. Don't even mention getting engaged. Even if we were married and had children, I wouldn't tolerate such things. Let's part on good terms. When they left, his mother held my hand and shed tears. Finally, she didn't say much and left. Later, I also heard some news about him one after another. After all, his home is so close to our workplace and people around knew something about our affairs. So there would always be some news reaching my ears in a roundabout way. Most of the people who mentioned him to me had a sense of gloating on my behalf. I knew that he finally married Sophia. Because of this, his mother was hospitalized several times. I knew that Sophia was domineering in his family. Perhaps because she held a grudge against his parents for breaking them up before, they were always arguing. I knew that Sophia forced his parents to give them money to buy a house. After being rejected, she pushed his father down in a fit of anger. I knew that his sister almost cut off all ties with him because of this. I knew that Sophia went around in their company talking about how Julian had wronged her, which finally made him lose his job. I knew that their chaotic marriage didn't last even half a year and ended up in divorce in the end. I also found it ironic that great love, the love that they were willing to involve an innocent girl to fulfill, finally fell apart. At that time, I was still single. A warm-hearted colleague, afraid that I still had feelings for him, tentatively asked me, "I heard that so-and-so got divorced. Would you consider seeing him again?" I shook my head firmly. Why should I look back at the past that I had already left behind? The colleague patted me on the shoulder and nodded vigorously in approval. That's right. Sister will find you a better one. I'll mobilize my resources to look for high-quality young men for you right away. About half a year later, I saw him again, at the school gate. He should have come to pick up his niece from school. He seemed to have lost a lot of weight. The sparkle in his eyes was gone. The corners of his lips that used to curl up were pulled down by the hardships of life. His hair was a bit too long, covering his neat brow bone, and he looked very dispirited, completely different from the high-spirited look that had made me fall for him at first sight. When I saw him at first glance, I still felt a bit flustered subconsciously, but soon I calmed down. He also saw me. His eyes lit up a little and he wanted to stop me to talk. I subconsciously wanted to avoid him. But then I thought that I had nothing to be guilty about towards him, so I stopped and waited for him to come up. He probably didn't expect that I would really stop. After being stunned for a moment, he opened his mouth and asked me, Are you okay? As you can see, I'm fine. Do you have something to say? No, nothing. I just thought that we hadn't seen each other for a long time and wanted to say hello. I nodded. Now that you've said hello, I'm leaving. Emma. He called out to me, I've been thinking a lot lately. If I had broken up with Sophia completely back then and if I had married you smoothly, my life would definitely be different now. I would be very happy, right? Sophia has ruined me. Ruined my marriage and ruined my life. I just realized now that what my parents said was right. I'm so regretful, Emma. I'm really regretful. Could you give me another chance? I'll love you well. Julian, I interrupted him, I have no regrets about you, so I don't have any thoughts of getting back together. I had loved him with all my heart. Although it ended like that in the end, I had given and tried my best, and I felt that I had lived up to my feelings. So now, when facing him, even though there would be a momentary fluctuation in my heart, I could already be calm. It wasn't that I didn't feel pain when we broke up, but when I thought about it carefully, during the time we were together, this man hadn't left me any memories worth lingering on. And my trust in him collapsed in an instant when he said, Did she contact you? I didn't dare to think about what I would become if I continued to be with him. I was afraid that I would become hysterical and unrecognizable in suspicion. That possibility made me shudder. So I firmly pulled myself out of the mire and never looked back. When I thought about it carefully later, I would even be grateful to Sophia. Although she brutally shattered my dream, she also pulled me back when I was about to step into a certain pit unconsciously. The phone rang. I pressed the answer button, and the bold voice of my colleague's sister came from the receiver. "Emma, sister wants to tell you that I've found a nice young man for you. Do you want to meet him?" I smiled. "Yes, I'll meet him. As for his questions, his regrets, and his unwillingness, what do they have to do with me?"